I'm not sure that either one of us understands what's going on here.
I still don't fully grasp it, which is why we wanted to talk to our next guest.
So the story is basically there have been more than 2,500 Quebec seniors evicted from their private seniors' residences between 2022 and 2023, which begs the question, A, why, and B, then what happens? So let's find out. Matt Del Vecchio is owner of Lianis Senior Transition. He's a certified professional consultant on aging as well. He's on the line right now. And by the way, you can catch him Sundays at 4 here on CJAD on his own show. So, Matt, thanks for taking the time this afternoon. We're both kind of looking at the story, trying to understand why these people have been evicted. And then the only part that I think makes any sense is that 88 RPAs closed their doors basically in the past year.
But why is that?
How did that happen?
Yeah, very, very concerning. 500 closures in the last 5 years, in fact. So it's just not a little trend. It's been going on for a while. And so it's almost two stories in one with this press release because it was a little confusing. I think the big concern is the closures of RPAs. And the end result is it's just too costly for many of the owner-operators to run an RPA profitably. And what's happening now with these evictions is there are some owners that have really put their blood, sweat, and tears, gone through pandemic, and they said, we just can't do it anymore, but maybe there's some value in my RPA. I'm going to sell it. I'm going to sell my land. I'm going to sell my building to an investor. Investor comes in and says, well, I'm not operating it as an RPA. We're going to decertify RPA, and we're going to open it up as a regular apartment building. Then the evictions start happening. So that is a big concern, and that's where we're starting to see these evictions for these poor seniors.
Let me slow you down here for people who don't understand. So when we talk RPAs, we're talking privately owned residences, right?
Yeah, so RPA is an acronym for Résidence Privée pour Aînés. So that's what we would know it as a regular private senior living community, a retirement home.
You still have to be licensed by the government. You still have to respect the rules that go with running a residence, right? All that remains the same.
Correct.
So they're closing because now financially they're unable, you believe, to keep going, or it makes more sense to sell your business, sell your land, collect that money, and not have to worry about this at all.
Yeah, and so those are the two issues there. The big issue is owner-operators of many RPAs, it has just not become viable for them. The cost of operations, food costs, labor is obviously a huge consideration if they could even get the labor.
Right.
But their costs now have risen dramatically in the last few years where some of them are saying, we just can't do it. And since the pandemic, one of the other challenges, they're not operating at full capacity, many of them. When they're at 100%, they've got good revenue coming in, but many of them are operating 60, 70, 80%, and this is where the problem is starting.
By government decree operating at that level? Like,
I'm sorry?
Why would they be operating at 65 to 70%? Is that government by government decree, or those are the rules now?
Because they don't.
No, they just have the capacity since the pandemic, and more and more people are afraid of perhaps making that transition. They're hunkering down at home. That's more and more demand for home care. Government, public residences, the opposite problem. The waiting lists are ridiculous, but the private sector has been struggling.
And let's remember that they were ravaged during the pandemic, so the people just haven't come as people passed away, they haven't filled up those spots again. So that was my question. You just answered part of it, Matt, was that this 2,500 Quebecers, these seniors who get evicted, what happens to them? They head into the public system and then, like you said, the wait list. So what is happening with them?
Right. So here's one of the problems. If you're going to shut down your RPA, many people in RPAs are getting some form of services. They might be getting meals, maybe some assistance with bathing, some care services. When you decertify an RPA, you're shutting down all those services. That call button or that pull cord for 24/7 care, you're sick in the middle of the night, that is all gone. So they're very vulnerable. So many of them with care and heavier care will try to get into the public system. But catch-22, they try to get into the public system and they hear that there's a 1.5 to 2 year waiting list to get in. And so they are very vulnerable. The government will try to get them into some transition beds. Most of the time what's happening is they're trying to find another RPA that will take them at hopefully in the same price range, but it's not easy.
Well, am I wrong? Didn't the government make a big point about saying they're going to build a whole bunch of residences? These are government residences over the past couple of years. How much of that actually happened?
And that there weren't going to be any more RPAs. I thought they were moving to make them obsolete.
Yeah, so just to distinguish two questions there. One is they are building, they just can't keep up. Not even close. So there's some good initiatives, smaller residences. It's not at the big box nursing homes anymore, but they just can't keep up with the aging population. When, Natasha, you're talking about getting rid of RPAs, what in fact is happening is there were private CHSLDs, okay? RPA, the level above RPA is CHSLD, long-term care homes.
Okay.
It's those private CHSLDs that are being converted into public. It's a long process, but that's the plan.
So is there a solution here? And I know that one of the things that they're not really happy with is even if you get evicted from one of these RPAs, the government gives you money and then at least some financial compensation. But then, of course, the organization says, you know what? That's not a step in the right direction. Money does not solve the problem here.
Exactly. The answer has to be prohibit evictions. If you're an investor and going into this, you're going to decertify RPA, there must be a law in there where you have to prohibit evictions. Now, one of the you're talking about solutions. You're right. They're throwing we'll compensate them financially. The government's saying this. Could you imagine 88-year-old woman, maybe with a little bit of dementia, some physical care needs? Oh, here's a few $1,000s. That's not the issue. The issue is you're disrupting and uprooting their lives. If they don't have family members or someone to advocate for them, that's a real problem. So by throwing money at them, cutting them a check is not going to cut it.
We're speaking with Matt Del Vecchio. He is the host of Life Unrehearsed here on CJAD 800. Matt, what's your advice then to families who find themselves in situations like this?
Well, a couple of things. I think we have to back up a little bit. The government, we are one of the weakest provinces when it comes to home care. We need to invest a whole lot more from a government perspective to support people to live at home longer. That would be one of the solutions. It's not the solution because very often I'll get a call, well, the CLSC isn't here 24/7 and mom's alone at night. So part of the solution, increase home care. I think we also need to help subsidizing people living in residences as well. There's not enough room in the public system. In private residences, by the way, the provincial government allocates somewhere between 10 and 15% of your monthly rent. You'll get money from the government. But is there a possibility that 10 or 15, should it be 20 or 30? There's availability in the private residences. They can take care of people, but they're too expensive for people. So hopefully the government can help subsidize those private residences as well. And a combination of home care, private residences that are subsidized better, and more long-term care homes in the public system is what's going to be needed.
I seem to remember the government having weighed in on this whole idea of, staying in your home as long as you possibly could, so more at-home care. That was talked about. Have we seen any results from it?
Here's the thing. They are pouring money into it, a lot of money into it, except the waiting list to get home care is actually increased, not decreased, because our population is aging quicker than the resources and money being put into the government.
I'm not hearing a lot of solutions here. I mean, there are clearly a lot of problems, but I don't know.
I bet it's keeping you very busy these days, Matt.
Well, it is, but, the reality is, people can only spend what they have. And, there are many, many conversations where I hang up and I honestly feel terribly because sometimes there's not much I can do. However, what I can say is that there are solutions sometimes that people don't realize. And that's what's keeping me busy, Natasha, where, I didn't know I can get that much from the government. Maybe it is affordable. Maybe I'm going to wait that year and a half to get into the public system. I can't do it at home anymore, but maybe for a year and a half, we can afford it. Those are the types of solutions we're trying to be creative and help people because people are vulnerable.
So what's the advice, Matt? Someone listening or has a parent or grandparent in a situation like this at an RPA, what are we suggesting that they do? And I'm not saying call you, but I mean, what are their options here?
Yeah, so if it's a situation where someone's coming in and saying, we're no longer an RPA, well, it's a problem. And so now you have to find alternatives. First I would approach the CLSC to see if there are some public options to try to get you into the public system.
Okay.
That's going to be the least expensive way to go about it. But I don't want to say that's the miracle solution because our healthcare system, it's a challenge. Start, though, with the CLSC. Call your local CLSC and try to get some help. Alternatively, you're going to have to find some alternative living at around the same price range and trying to get the same services. There is availability out there, but maybe you're just not aware that there are options out there. So there are resources like ours and others that can help families try to find those alternatives.
Okay. Pretty awful situation to find yourself in, right towards latter stages of your life. Yeah. Wow. Matt, thank you so much. We appreciate it.
All right, thank you.
Thanks, all right, Matt Del Vecchio. And again, if you want to hear more, Life Unrehearsed, which is a great show, by the way.
Every Sunday, 4 o'clock here on CJAD 800. He is the owner of Liana's Senior Transition Support.